All works of fiction displayed during this episode that resemble real-life situations are coincidental and are not meant to serve as guides or tutorials to commit any crimes in any country. Please consult an attorney for local laws and regulations. And as always, trust your inner criminal.
Hey, welcome everybody to ThugCrowd. Hi. I just got back in the nick of time. I just got a headset and I'm stoked about it.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Yeah. Hopefully it's not obnoxious or giving any weird feedback, but yeah, should be cool.
What did you get?
Huh?
What did you get?
Oh, I got a Logitech one. It's just like a pretty cheap one, but I just wanted something that would be like not too overkill because I feel like a lot of them are like really like over the top. They have like LEDs and like all this crazy stuff. I just need something to talk into, and so I don't really want.
And you're gonna end up stepping on it too.
Yeah, obviously, or like just pulling the cord on accident and destroying it, or yeah.
At least now we can hear that sexy mechanical keyboard 10 times better.
Yeah, hopefully this will help mitigate it a little bit because it's closer to my face and I can mute it a lot easier than the way I used to do it. Because I used to basically use like a conference call like microphone for like a boardroom, and that's very unwieldy at times. But yeah, so hey everybody, thank you for tuning in. I realized earlier that there was no music playing at all when I started the stream, so I apologize to everybody who was just sitting here listening to silence and waiting, but we still have people like chatting, which is kind of cool. But yeah, oh, and it also says Sunday stream. Wow, I'm like really dropping the ball today. All right, episode 17, Bug Bounties. So yeah, today we are going to discuss Bug Bounties and everything that comes with that. So hold on one second, let me pull up my thing here. Crap.
So I'll do introductions tonight.
Yes, actually do that real quick. Sorry, I'm getting back in.
Daniel coming at us from across the pond somewhere. Hermit checking in with microphone tonight. Jen from somewhere magical. MG representing the West Coast. Nux rocking that new device that he got tonight. Faith keeping us faithful. Poison keeping us poisoned. I'm ReadMe. We've got Shell and the Master of Ceremonies, you.
That was good. I like that.
That was good.
Yeah. Thanks. I'll be here all night.
The Master of Ceremonies, you.
Now what do we do?
Well, we have some news. I mean, we could.
Yeah, let's rap about that.
Yeah.
That 100K bug bounty that Intel paid out.
Oh yeah. Does anybody know?
Daniel, you have anything to say about that?
Well, it seemed like everyone noticed earlier that Intel paid out a $100,000 bounty earlier today, and apparently it's a new vulnerability that's closely related, quote unquote, to a Spectre variant. So Twitter, InfoSec Twitter pretty quickly picked that up.
Yeah, so 100K, I mean, that's got to be worth like a lot more, right?
You can buy more Intel CPUs to hack on.
One or two. Yeah.
What does that
It's a lot more if you sell it to like a back channel, not to a bug bounty.
I just mean like, you know, like if you look at the amount of money that it cost Intel with Spectre, And like if they've got a new bug, I mean, they're making out pretty well on this deal, selling, buying it for $100K.
I think the real thing is the chips that have been patched for Spectre and Meltdown. Those the new microarchitectures that are supposed to fix all this. Like, does that now have to happen all over again? That's what I want to know.
People keep discovering new vulnerabilities, and Intel keeps fixing them with new hardware.
Right? Yeah. Like,
Yeah, it's an evil circle.
Well,
New
their
CPU, new
software.
vuln.
Anytime they introduce any kind of software, they screw that up tragically as
The
well.
thing is,
So
not
Well, the
everything can
management-
be fixed with a microcode update.
Yeah. I think the real question is how many more of these are we going to see? Like,
no,
two pretty big ones in like a year. So far.
has Apple decided whether they're getting rid of Intel altogether and doing their own chips?
well, PowerPC is dead, right? So
I remember reading about that. Let me find it.
Spark is dead. Thanks, Oracle.
Apple plans to use its own chips in Macs from 2020, replacing Intel.
Yeah, or MediaTek. That'd be great. Suddenly, if iPhones were exactly the same hardware as all the shitty China phones, that'd be fantastic.
Glorious.
So many 0 days all over the place. So many exploits.
I was trying to privask on my TV earlier, and it looks like the internals of the actual computer running LG WebOS is a MediaTek. A MediaTek board.
Yeah, that's a
It's everywhere.
mid-tier. Any mid-tier brand name, that's what you're gonna get. What are your options? You got MediaTek, you got Qualcomm, or you got Intel. Consumer devices. MediaTek is the cheapest by far. So
I mean, it works. TM.
So we had another thing that I thought was kind of interesting today. That was about time hop. So apparently people had stolen or had taken all the data from time hop, which is like a service that like archives your old Facebook posts, and it like just says like, oh hey, you posted this a year ago today, and it'll like show you just old posts to just bring them up. And so this basically, the data that's on here is everybody's Facebook posts, even if they're private, like, which is pretty crazy. There's 21 million users that were using it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think the
someone
big
popped
takeaway-
their cloud provider account apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It included all sorts of stuff like tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, phone numbers, first and last names, email addresses, all that jazz.
It's pretty weird, pretty wild that this is just there, and you could do this. Like, I mean, like, it just seems like this is something that I don't know, they would have protected a little bit more, given that it's given complete private access to your data, like on Facebook. Even post that you just posted that's just you, or private for only you. So yeah, very,
All social media apps leak so much information lately. There's Facebook with Cambridge Analytica. There's Twitter with their bot, and people scraping and abusing their API, and now this.
yeah, no, there's like quite a bit, and I think it's because at this point now, the social media companies have so much data on everybody, and they're so ubiquitous that it's like, I don't know, like if you talk to somebody, like a regular person, they say, "Oh, I don't have a Facebook, or I don't really use social media," it's like seen as weird,
Do you
Just like,
guys are you guys getting the advertise? Like, I've noticed on normal TV now, there's Facebook ads. Like ads, hey, come back to Facebook. We're stopping fake news.
Yeah, right. I've seen that in
Yeah.
people defacing real life advertisements for Facebook as well.
Yeah, I've seen
Oh,
digital.
that's good. I'm down with that. That's cool.
I'm gonna find a link to it.
Yeah, there's digital signage and shit like all around me. That's like Facebook, come back. We don't share data and we hate fake friends or something. It's like
wow. It's like
Um,
new code. Some kind of McDonald's making a new version of the Big Mac. I'm a little
It's
cynical
the
about
McRib. It's the McRib of social media.
it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, MG had said that he wanted to talk a little bit about two different stories that we had found today for the past week. The first one was about the DIY guns. MG, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you want to walk us through this? Because I was reading through this and trying to understand a little bit more about it. What exactly is this?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, this has been going on for about 5 years, so there's a long story, but the summary here is, of course, the 3D printed gun topic, in which Cody Wilson and Defense Distributed, his organization, posted these online, and the government, federal government, came after him and said, you need to take those down because this qualifies as export of arms. The physical file itself, they were saying that was a weapon. The last time they did something similar was back in the 90s with cryptography. PGP, things like that, were considered an arm under the definition of that. The law is ITAR. So it basically the exact same thing there. Obvious nuanced differences, but yeah, they said you got to take this down. So he took it down, but he took him to court too, and said, "Hey, this is infringing on my what was it, First, Second, and Fifth Amendment rights." And they primarily hinged on the First Amendment. Freedom of speech was being impeded there. The EFF and lots of other organizations came out to kind of defend him in various ways. But
Is this is this the same company that did the Ghost Gun of the 3D printed
yes,
lower receiver of the AR-15?
yeah. So that's two separate things, but yes. So the 3D printing gun was called the Liberator, is just a single shot, and then since they had to take that down, they released basically a desktop mill, or kind of like a CNC, to do lower receivers on aluminum, which is really cool. And they were selling those, and a large part of the sales for that was to fund the legal battle. I think he spent nearly like $1 million just going after the government, trying to get them to say, you know what, you can actually do this. And so what happened here recently is the Department of Justice said they didn't. This wasn't a situation where he actually won in court. What happened is they offered him a settlement. So that's the government saying, we're not actually wrong here, but we'll do some things for you if you make this go away. So from most people's perspective, that's a win, but like on paper, legally, it's not a demonstration of wrongdoing. An important thing legally. But anyway, what they agreed is that now he can publish these, and they have to pay him back. It's like 10% of his legal fees. They're actually going to revoke the pieces inside of ITAR that they claim they owned. I think they're actually pushing. They're moving the delegation of this off to the, I think it's Chamber of Commerce, and they have no way of trying to stop this. So yeah, he's going to be effectively setting up a library, and inside this library, he's going to have the server that physically hosts these files. It's kind of it's meant to be a bit of a symbolic thing, but yeah, there's a lot of reasons for it. And effectively, yeah, now you can upload and serve and download 3D print files that are for weaponry. Very, very interesting development there.
Yeah,
You wouldn't download an AR-15.
Would you? Yeah. From the guns perspective, I know. Just to add a little bit in there, that they added another interesting bit, which is that things like AR-15s, which the Ghost Gunner was, of course, dealing with, they specifically said that they are not weapons of war, and they're just common use things. So from the Second Amendment aspect of here, it's going to have some interesting implications going forward. But yeah, if anybody has any questions about that, it's something I've been pretty close to over the last few years, and I can certainly fill in some gaps.
I got a question that I just kind of came up with while you were talking about that.
Nice.
So Wassenrar is like a thing, right? Like it's weapons of war internationally, and it's kind of spilled into InfoSec a little bit because those are actually considered weapons of war.
Yep.
Has he had to deal with that at all? For
so what was it specifically? Is there a law?
is it like is it
Was Wassenrar ever part of the conversation for the
Oh,
dialogue?
I'm honestly not sure. I think everything was ITAR related,
Interesting.
but I'd have to dig into that specific one. They threw a few things down.
What's ITAR again?
Import export of arms, effectively. I think it's international trafficking arms
okay.
regulation or something like that. ITAR.
And
So
yeah, I would imagine it's probably along the same lines. So interesting. So they didn't classify it as a weapon of war then. They classified it as individual, like you said.
Yeah, they said that the types of weapons aren't actually weapons of war. They're the general consumer weapons. But even further, that the files themselves they fall under the First Amendment effectively.
It's super
So that
interesting.
really cool.
Very cool.
But there's a little interesting tidbit in there that they were totally expecting. This delves into the politics of this, but they were expecting Hillary to win. And that was a big portion of why they decided to set up a library. Is they were expecting that they would never have this ruling unfold, or this settlement rather, and they were gonna basically just serve these things up on the internet illegally and wait till the government came after them and tried to seize the server and take them in prison, whatever unfolds. But they were expecting a literal gunfight at a library with the server. It's just crazy.
That's really wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to see how this sort of plays out, because it's just the things that are now possible are just so beyond the scope of what the law could have possibly predicted. Like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people who are still in office now making laws would have never been like, hey, you don't know anything about computers, do you? Well, do you think that a computer could just literally print a gun out? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, you could
You
never
wouldn't download a car.
Hell yeah, I would.
Yeah, I would. But nowadays, people can 3D print so many things, including weapons, and it's just like it's crazy that now there has to be just. I mean, we're gonna get into this topic about laws in a couple of weeks regarding computer crimes, but it's interesting to see how the sort of scope changes, where it's either too broad or too restrictive. And it's definitely just an interesting thing to see play out.
Exactly. I'm guessing this is going to set a very interesting precedent for a whole lot of things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting conversation when it gets into international too. I think that really changes stuff.
So what about automatic weapons?
So there was a couple of exemptions in there. The files themselves are their own thing, and you, of course, I'm speaking within the scope of the U.S. anyway. You still have to abide by all the things like you're not allowed to literally make any weapon, and if you're prohibited, things like that. This was specific to just the files themselves, but they did mention that automatic weapons shouldn't be included in this allowance. And there's something interesting about caseless ammunition. And I don't know the details on that, but that was another thing that was not allowed. And I think it's just something weird about how ITAR has kind of artifacts built into it. So I think over the next week we'll get some details on why that is, but it's very likely just firearm specific.
Yeah, I think if you're in Australia as well, like from our perspective, obviously our gun laws are a lot stricter. Anything like an AR-15 here is definitely illegal, unless you have a specific permit for professional culling. I think you can get some sort of automatic weapon. Semi-automatic weapons, but anything semi is like out of the question. It's like bolt action centerfires, some like rim fires, and some 12 gauge. Like a lever action 12 gauges, or maybe a pump action like centerfire is probably the fastest unloading weapon that you can legally own. So
the question becomes, what are your gun laws, but what are your printer laws?
I think. Go ahead. Yeah, I just think if you go ahead and if you were to get one of these devices or download these files in Australia, I think because of the way that once you register a firearm is registered to a person and an address. It is state dependent, so our state's state to state. But there's this part where the state police can at any time inspect your gun locker, which must be attached to like a structural wall and blah 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 blah. There's all these things, and so if they came into your house and they're like, "What's this?" and you're like, "Oh, it just prints magazines," and it's like, "Well, how many rounds does a magazine hold?" And these aren't registered, and yeah, then I think you're gonna have a lot more problems here than you would in the States.
I think it's
Yeah,
really
definitely.
interesting because Australia is known for getting rid of all your guns, though, right?
No. We didn't get rid of all our guns. We got rid of semi-automatic and automatic weapons.
Yeah.
We got rid of most. Like, if you want, you can still own a pump-action shotgun, for example,
Yeah.
if you meet the requirements. If you have a specific permit and use case for owning a suppressor, you can also own a suppressor. But if you don't, you can only own a flash suppressor or a muzzle brake. So
And-
threaded barrels are like, there's a lot of nuances between the states and stuff as well. So you have to know where you are and what you're doing. So this stuff sort of might apply to us in the future, but I think right now, obviously America's obviously at the forefront.
Yeah, in some ways, you guys are better off than the state of California. Like suppressors out here are just no go in any form, and
You need a real good reason. It's like
yeah, totally. We just don't have the option. But yeah, to kind of tie that together with the recent news, and if I were to want to produce a 3D printed gun, there was actually nothing stopping me from doing that. To begin with, in context of this, I would just have to source the file not online or something like that. They were effectively stopping him from serving the files online. Everything after that still applies. So in California, I'd get that file, and then as of this year, the laws they put into place effectively say you have to call the state on yourself to ask them to do a background check on you. And if you pass the background check, then you're allowed to make your own weapon, but also you need a serial number that you put on it as well. So I don't know how well that's actually going to work in reality, but that's the law, and you would have to follow that if you wanted to make the gun in the state of California, for example.
Definitely, I think like serialless weapons, like serialless firearms, not even the majority of illegal firearms in Australia. I believe the majority of illegal firearms here are simply just legal, like they would be legal firearms should they were they registered. So had they been registered during the few amnesties we've had, where you could take it into a gun store and have the police, have the paperwork filled out, that would then make that firearm now legal, even though it's not semi-automatic or anything. There's a lot of like real little weird things, but if you have a serialless firearm, like that's actually a really, really, really small percentage of illegal firearms, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, so I don't want to pick up too much of your time on this, MG. If you want us to also talk about the other thing that you had shared as well, or want to talk about the Office 365 stuff.
Yeah, that one's pretty fascinating as well.
Yeah.
Basically, news broke, and I think it was initially through CrowdStrike. But basically, there was rather an Office 365 API that was kind of secret, and it allowed much more detailed telemetry and general forensics about actions that happened on that site. I did some digging, and essentially, I'll just kind of tie this together in how it transpired. But for whatever reason, you can make your own assumptions. It seems like Microsoft had this API in place, undocumented, nobody that seemed to be using it that was known. So who would that be? But they had some customers that needed this level of detail to do forensics. So Microsoft was sharing info about how to do that with these companies. And it's a very small group, and eventually, people slip up, whether it's intentional or accidental, and details about that kind of get out. It created an interesting scenario where a lot of shops were cut out from being able to do forensic investigations on Office 365 unless they had this, secret access to the secret tool. So a very small number of people were able to use that and get a lot of money from it. Whether or not they were granted access directly from Microsoft, or they just happened to know about it, through the very small grapevine, it's kind of up for debate, and more info has to come out. But ultimately, CrowdStrike kind of published this write up about and kind of discovered how it works, and a lot of people got really pissed off. A lot of debates happened about the morality of keeping this quiet versus sharing with the community, whether you should be educating your customer on how to do this themselves versus keeping it as some secret tool that you can just get more billable hours for, keeping your competitive edge against all your other competition. Up for debate. I've certainly got my own opinions, but Microsoft decided to shut that down within a week of news breaking about this. So that kind of adds some interesting questions to the situation. That I don't know. What do you guys think?
I read that certain companies would not hire forensics companies that did not have access to that API. Hey,
Yep.
do you have the secret tool? What secret tool? Okay, you don't know. Go away.
Yep.
What was the what was the scope? So was it within, if you have an Office 365 instance for your company and have like 5 domains on it, can you only access your own domains, or could you start querying external domains as well, or where did it end?
Yeah, that's I didn't see anything that indicated you were able to see data outside of what you should be able to see, like your ownership, but I don't know the full answer to that.
I believe there is a specific ACL for it. That would make sense.
Okay.
I can't imagine you would be able to read any like outside your own scope.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
That is true. It was almost keylogger.
It's not unimaginable, but it sounds kind of unlikely.
Well,
Yeah.
right. The other thing is that if it wasn't widely used or looked at, who knows what kind of flow issues there were with it.
Yep.
So
yeah, true.
All sorts of possibilities there.
That does add one little point that I forgot, which is that I saw what seems to be a semi-official response from Microsoft, or someone claiming they were talking to Microsoft on the phone, where Microsoft said that it's a bit of an issue that some forensics firms may have been overrepresenting what the tool can actually do, and caution that they can't guarantee the completeness of the data. So there may be some interesting cases in the future where these firms who are hoarding the tooling and selling access may have actually been selling improper or incomplete forensics data to their customers. And if those customers figure this out, that'll be interesting. Who's going to sue them first, their customers or Microsoft for using their tools and selling access to the tools?
Interesting.
Or someone who got fired because of evidence.
Yep.
I mean, it was just an undocumented API to the service that you've bought access to.
It does give you, though, if you look at some of the data in the post, like it gives you a little bit of an insight of what Microsoft are storing. But even now, they might not be serving it anymore. It's still getting stored, right?
Yeah, I think they just removed access to view some of it. There might be more hidden unicorn tools that we don't even know about.
True. Yeah, it's interesting when people discover sort of secret APIs or undocumented APIs and just like what you can actually pull from them. But speaking of data that people didn't want you to see, I saw another really interesting article. Well, it's not even interesting as much as it's just like another facepalm kind of moment. So apparently another fitness app has done another exposure of locations of spies and military bases.
Oh yeah, Polar.
Yep, Polar. So it's just like the one that happened with Strata.
It's like exactly the same. It just it's history repeating itself,
Yeah, and it just
the
seems
thing
like
is that Polar leaked even more data than Strava did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of stuff like actually leak besides location data?
Apparently covering everything a user has uploaded to the platform since 2014.
fuck?
Amazing.
The investigation describes all sorts of interesting targets in the data. An officer whose airbase hosts nuclear weapons, Western military personnel in Afghanistan, yet another officer whose profile carries his name, and whose location hosts drones.
I think there were a few instances where people who actually set their profile data to private still had their data exposed.
Oh yeah,
Which didn't
it
happen
was,
on the
it
other
was
one.
all of it. And like, I'm not sure about the first one, if you could find individual user data, but this one was very specific in that you could search by user, which means that you could see, like, if someone were to say, you know, like go on a run around the block of their office for lunch, and then come home, and then go on, you know, a run at, you know, anytime between 2014 and now from their house, you could match the location of their house with their actual workplace.
I swore that the previous one had that as well, like the community, whatever the hell, right?
Well, I think what we talked about before, Dan, was we were relating it back to pleaserobme.com. That whole I'm out of my house, come and rob me.
No. I didn't do too much. Like looking up on the old one. I did read the article. I dropped it again.
But this is pretty crazy. I think that it's like
Well, who's next, right? Like it's gonna happen again,
Yeah.
apparently, and it's gonna be like in a few months. So who's it gonna be?
Is it Fitbit? I hope not.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so.
I feel like it's just a matter of like when at this point for a lot of these things, and it sucks because like what do you, I don't know, like people want to track their fitness. Like it just seems like why are these companies just like not handling data properly? It just
a lot of the really scary thing is that
facilities,
it's
Sorry,
not
go ahead.
breaches. Sorry, man. It's just not breaches anymore. It's actual just like
laziness.
Laziness, yeah.
I think it's a fair amount of stupidity as well.
I think it's desensitized public, right?
A lot of secure facilities have policies about smartphones and radio devices. They just don't allow that sort of stuff on site, or they have like jamming equipment to disable emissions from like Bluetooth and cell networks. But we have these like accessory devices that collect data and then are later paired with like an iPhone somewhere else off premises. They're going to have to expand their scope to say no electronic devices at all. We're going to strip search you at the gate.
Yeah,
I think it's unenforceable.
That's like
I think there's a kind of thing whereas you know, the classic oh, we could build it, but nobody stops to think like, should we build it?
Yeah.
Or is building it worth, you know, is building it and selling it worth more money than you know, looking stupid when there's this not even breach?
I think people definitely are using it, right? But it's a good example of how policy does not affect anything. It's not actually going to do anything for you.
Well, speaking of cost-benefit analysis, the next story here I think is really interesting. There's a new virus, I guess you would just call it, malware, that decides if your computer is good for either mining cryptocurrency or for ransomware. Can you guys read this one?
Don't ransom.
So basically there's like what, like there's one if else statement: if I have enough power, mine, else ransom.
Yeah, it's just basically like once it spreads, it's like, well, where am I? Am I on like a really like low end you know, computer somewhere, or am I on some giant server somewhere, like, or some gaming PC? Like, you know, yeah, definitely interesting approach.
Yeah, it's conditional, right?
AWS focused one.
I think the next thing that will come up will be kind of like, you know, which coin to mine based on the, you know, the specs, and then how much to ransom if it's going to ransom. Be like, oh, this person lives in a third world country, they probably can't pay that much of a ransom. We'll just make the ransom smaller.
You know what would be a really good ransom would be to insist that the person gets like a decent video card before they can unlock the computer.
Can you imagine? They could actually
Treat
check
yourself.
Multi-stage
Also-
like extortion.
Regarding the AWS does some pretty great heuristics. If you try to mine anything on an AWS instance, they shut you down almost instantly.
I don't know. They didn't have a problem taking my money when I was doing it. They took a lot of it.
I remember what trying to run so when services were banned on so like you couldn't IRC from like insert shell provider here. So you just like get the source for IRSSI or whatever and just run a quick sed and a find replace for IRSSI to KSH. And it's like, I like corn shell, leave me alone.
Nice.
The next one. This one I thought was interesting too. Speaking of cryptocurrency, so Japan has issued their first ever sentence for cryptojacking for somebody stealing cryptocurrency or for illegitimately mining cryptocurrency.
I love how much the guy made off this. That's the best part.
Yeah,
Wow.
a whopping $45.
What? And they give him a prison sentence? That's fucked up.
5,000 yen.
Man.
Yeah, it's just they basically they use CoinHive, then they got in trouble for it, and that's just interesting to see that people get in trouble for it, and the fact that also that's how much money you make.
No,
Not to
they're
mention-
making an example. They're making an example out of that guy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to remember something about this one. This one is a bit different as well because the users who were, quote, infected chose to download this application and run it. It just didn't say that it was going to mine crypto. So this wasn't like an exploit that started mining crypto in the background or whatever. It was just like straight up user wants application, user downloads application, runs it, it mines crypto. And they don't get told about it.
We get into this gray area where like adware or any other like potentially unwanted program kind of software. That's okay in the background as long as it's not actually spinning CPU cycles to do blah. Like that's pretty.
Yeah, you can have 47 AOL toolbars that all like bring revenue back to AOL, but as long as they don't use any CPU, it's all right.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, yeah, from a crunching numbers perspective, the CPU doesn't know what it doesn't give a shit. It doesn't know whether it's crypto or serving ads or I don't know why the law would differentiate between computation, but
yeah, I think it's because it's intentionally used to make money. It's just another thing that is the laws have to catch up with it. It's pretty. Nobody could have predicted even like 10 years ago this would have been a thing where you could illegitimately somehow make money off of somebody's computer out of nothing. That's just like
it'd be the same as if you're in some new game and you found a way that if you just kept pressing this button over and over again, you could defraud money out of other players and steal their imaginary gold coins or whatever. The law would look at it from the fraud perspective, like what was the intent? Did you obtain financial advantage by tricking people? Yes or no? We don't really care like how you did that, but that's the crime.
It's really unfortunate though, because you're talking about like $45. So they clearly were going after somebody that didn't have any money. Like this guy did not defend himself he didn't arm himself to the teeth with the best lawyers. He got railroaded. It's kind of messed up.
Was there any sort of I don't think there was any sort of numbers on how many clients actually got hit with it.
I think it said 90 actually. 90 people had downloaded this malware program. Yeah.
We could do a Tor node and get more in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
I think what you meant to say, Dan, was somebody could make a Tor node.
Oh, yeah, somebody.
That's Swim Guy.
That's Swim Guy.
Yeah, where is he? Another story that I saw this week that I didn't get to read too much into, but it was kind of interesting and I wanted to mention it, was that there is a cyber espionage group was accused of stealing dealing certificates for malware signing, which is like, I don't know, they were stolen from a company called Changing Information Technology Inc. And they've been used to sign a backdoor the Plead malware.
I could see like Netgear being a good one to go after, like a
Mhm.
well-known company. But man, what the heck was the name again? That sounds terrible.
Changing Information Technology Inc.
I mean, if I see a driver signed by that or something, it's still gonna pique my interest.
I think like previously this happened to without shit talking any company without knowing, correct? Like exactly. I believe Realtek because they have a lot of
Oh, yeah.
manufacturers for their NICs. I think Realtek certificates at one point were used to
Hey,
to create.
a lot of the actual known NSA toolkit kind of binaries was signed with signing certificates stolen from other Taiwan manufacturers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty good place
Yeah.
to steal code signing certificates. Just go to Taiwan and drop some USB sticks around.
Or just downloading drivers from Realtek is sketchy to begin with.
As far as I'm aware, there's like methods to circumvent the driver signing anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
probably.
sure that they're not going to last for a whole great time, but
Wasn't Stuxnet like one of the first ones that did driver signing?
Yeah, that was the first one that came to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Dooku and Flame and the variants afterwards all had. That was one of the original things that tied them together. Researchers
Oh,
have said,
interesting.
"Oh, okay, this is nation state level, with stolen certificates from major corporations. That's
Calling
not
card.
script kiddies. That's something worse."
Yeah.
how much does code signing certificates actually cost from Microsoft?
A
Well, yeah.
lot.
That's kind of what my point was, though. Like, you could just register shell corporations, and I'm assuming with enough money get it, right? But the deal was
same
they
with
were using,
iOS, I suppose.
but they're using
It gets a little bit difficult if you get into the whole made for iPhone kind of branding thing, the licensing arrangements and stuff. But I guess Microsoft's got something similar, but to just sign a binary as as Realtek or whatever.
well,
Obviously,
yeah, exactly. It's like a well-known name, Realtek or Cisco or any of these big companies. You're stealing the name, and that's what's I'm assuming
Plus
they're doing.
bypassing AV, like that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That's primarily. No one's actually they're hoping that you never actually get to the point of viewing the certificate that the code was signed with, because that means that somebody's suspicious about the executable.
Yeah, and like with the signed certificate, you just like bypass, straight bypass the outer rings without even
Just whitelisted by like Windows Defender.
Yeah.
Let alone
So,
any
hey,
AV on top of that.
But it's
let me just load this shit into the kernel. What up?
That's crazy.
So next story that I have in here, which I thought was kind of scary and interesting, was so Hamas apparently had hacked the smartphones of over 100 IDF soldiers by catfishing them on Facebook. And
I heard about that.
Yeah, so like the Israeli Defense Force had a bunch of soldiers that were basically tricked into downloading some like World Cup schedule apps and some dating apps, and they basically just backdoor their phones and are able to like spy on them, take data from the phone, get like GPS, camera, everything, and they did it through Facebook, which is pretty interesting.
Why do soldiers have phones like that? They don't compartmentalize from the bed stuff.
I mean,
there's a policy against it.
But also,
These
I
were
mean,
apparently young soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, it's compulsory to serve in the Israeli Defense Force if you're in Israel. So, like, they're like, imagine being 18 and being forced to go to the army and just wanting to chat with hot singles in your area. Like, obviously you're gonna click on shit. Like, it makes sense. It's a interesting target, but it's just interesting to see that that's a tactic that is being used.
I know I've heard this story before, so it's interesting that it's continuing. It's amazing.
I wonder if you're like deployed, right? You're in the middle of the arse end of Syria or something, and you just get this like hot singles in your area, and you're like, oh hell yeah.
I mean, yeah,
like ISIS singles, like in that area. I don't really.
Yeah, exactly.
Suddenly a picture of sheep pops up.
Oh my
Wasn't
god!
this like This had something to do with the World Cup, though, right? This isn't. Like,
yeah, they're basically going for like generic, like low hanging fruit, like this World Cup app or this dating app, like talk to me here, like the same kind of stuff that they use that we normally avoid. But I mean, if you're bored and maybe don't have the same sort of mindset that we have, I mean, you might be a little more susceptible to clicking on some stupid shit to talk to some girl, even though you're like, we're already talking on Facebook. Why can't we talk here?
And you think if you compromise one phone, like where's that one phone gonna go? After it's compromised, all over a base, like to the barracks, into headquarters. Like
you can map out.
Unreal.
You can map out schedules. You can map out where everything is just based on somebody's movement alone. Like a bunch of phones.
Not even that. Like when they're active, like when they're speaking, they're probably off duty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It looked like it was doing direct chats too. Like they were taking the time to individually kind of spearfish them. Seems like a lot of effort. That's interesting.
This actually kind of reminds me. It's like I know this is something we've seen like forever, but one of those camgirl bots hit me up. But the platform it hit me up through was actually PS4 messages, which I thought was different. And yeah, it was hitting me up, and it was like, "Hey, how you doing? Like, how old are you?" And I'm like, "I'm 4.5." And they're like, "Oh, what are your interests?" I'm like, "Dinosaurs." And then they're like, "Do you want to play a game?" I'm like, "Is it dinosaurs?" And like the bot just does its script, but it came out for like a pretty funny conversation. I thought.
Feed it
like,
a comma, feed it an apostrophe, and it just cukes. Happened on Skype one time.
Oh, that's great.
No, the really bad ones definitely. I've seen Tinder bots and other really funny bots that just like poop out so much weird, sketchy links that you just like say anything remotely out of the scope of whatever the developer decided to put into the thing, and you can just make them stop talking.
Awesome. So I found what I think is the actual app that they used. They said it was called Golden Cup.
Oh wow! No way. Is that really it?
That's what it said in the article. That it was called Golden Cup. And it was
Holy shit. That's cool.
Just posted that in the Twitch chat, so have fun, everybody. Before Octets can take a look at that one too.
I would recommend anybody who is going to do that though to use an emulator and potentially if you're going to run it and some Tors and some VPNs and all the things. You probably don't want to get mistaken for an IDF soldier.
That would be really bad.
And make sure to spoof your GPS location to Israel.
Jeez.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was like an octave lower than usual. That was good. But yeah, the last story I have here, I didn't actually get to read too much of it because I saw this later on today and I was still working and stuff and I wasn't able to read too much into it. But this thing about TrustWave and the breach with TrustWave, did anybody read this or understand what this was?
I read about that, but that was a clusterfuck, so I didn't really look at it.
Yeah.
Whoa! So the Heartland breach, TrustWave's being sued for that.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's big news.
That's like a decade ago.
Yeah, that's
that was the biggest breach, I think, for a while. It was the biggest breach of all time, right?
Security firm sued for failing to detect malware that caused 2009 breach. So they found this first breach, but there was a second one they didn't find, apparently.
Wow. TrustWave's owned by Singtel, which is one of the biggest Southeast Asian telecommunications company.
So yeah, what actually happened in this? What is this breach? I mean, I don't remember this.
That's kind of disturbing if you can sue someone for that.
For not finding something.
I mean, if you pay them to clean up a breach and they don't.
Well, it's because of PCI DSS. So someone can retroactively say that TrustWave gave Heartland a PCI tick of approval and said, it's certified, passes all the compliance. Then they got popped. So apparently, I'm just looking over this quickly. TrustWave had been contracted to perform yearly checks of Heartland in compliance with PCI's data requirements in 2005. TrustWave did not detect that hackers had installed malware in 2007 through a SQL injection attack that allowed the attacker to issue commands to an internet-exposed database. So
this
TrustWave
is related to the whole...
A year later, they also missed malware actively running on Heartland's domain.
So this is also related to the whole Unix terrorist deal, right?
For people that
What?
Unix
I
terrorists.
think it was Heartland. That was TJ Maxx or whatever, right?
I was thinking it was this. I know where your head was at. I was thinking the same thing. But a payment processor. I don't think it was Heartland. I think it was something else. I don't recall offhand.
So, but if you're certifying someone for PCI compliance,
It's awful on it.
You're.
But yeah,
you're not the one. You're not the one who's doing a virus scan on every computer in their whole system, right? You're just.
Well, yeah.
You're just a
you actually
QSA.
are, though. If you're doing audits, you potentially are looking at virus scan output or looking at processes that are running. And
Well, I mean, they could have just like put out like a bunch of QSAs into their different tech departments, and a QSA is a policy person. They're not a so they're PCI policy. They're not a technical person. So they could have just sat there with the QSAs in the room, and the QSAs got like their 300-page PCI checklist and gone like, do you hash credit cards in this manner? And they would have said yes. Do you store the first 6 digits in clear text for later use? Yes. Do you store the last 4 digits in later use for the user to see which card they used? Yes. Okay. And they're the kind of questions that a lot of QSAs are going through. Like, when do you run virus scans? Not like, show me the virus scan. Like, how often do you run them? And show me where they run from and what do they run on. Whether or not that QSA can technically determine whether that's a portion of the network that is relevant, a portion of the network that is not relevant. Like, these are hard questions for somebody who's not in that company every day. So, which is like, you assume that Trustwave would be able to bridge that gap, but in any scenario with any size business, like bringing in a third party to ask these questions, you really need to rely on that company themselves to come back and, tell you the truth and be able to know what the truth is as well, I guess, is the hard part.
yeah, hopefully, like, people be reasonable, and it seems like something that should get thrown out pretty easily.
To put on my I don't have a CIS, but to put on my imaginary CIS pat, one of the correct ways to deal with in risk management, right? This is why PCI DSS enables e-commerce to work at all. This is why we're allowed to send credit card numbers on the internet at all, is because we have this compliance standard, which allows companies to transfer the risk away by insuring against it. And that's exactly what they've done here. And that's an acceptable, like, that's the way banks think. They're like, what is that risk potentially going to cost me? Oh, $1 million? All right, we'll insure it for $1 million.
We'll insure it for 10 million. Now who cares?
It even says in the article that they were hired to assess, not manage the risk. So that's friggin' ridiculous.
It's a bad precedent because there's a lot of vendors out there, just like Trustwave, like Qualys, that do on-demand PCI compliance scans that are just a basic Nessus kind of active scan and spider against like looking for OWASP top 10 stuff. And they run it in a time box period, and they're like, right, well, we scanned all of your properties that we can see, and SSL is fine. We didn't find any like SQLI or cross-site scripting or anything. So here's a tick that says you've had your yearly PCI scan done.
Yeah.
What's that
So when
other
the auditor
Qualys
comes along and
tool?
says,
Sorry, keep going.
So just to emphasize what you said, so when the auditor comes along and says, "Do you have yearly securities tests done?" They go, "There, here you go. Here's the Qualys PCI scan that we paid $500 for a month ago."
Yeah, so Qualys
I saw
also
a
have
Trustwave guy who worked for Fire Labs at the time give a presentation at one of these local hacker meetups, and he was very unimpressive. I feel like taking a fucking nap. So I don't really have a lot of faith in their aptitude, as a company. So whatever. Just based on my interactions with that one guy,
Yeah.
I did walk out of the malware freak show
from Mozilla
at
now.
DEF CON.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so like I was at DEF CON one year, and they were doing one of their malware freak shows, and basically the talk went like this: here's a POS terminal, it's infected with malware. We're going to scan this card, or we're going to swipe this card, and then we're going to run some Perl scripts we're not going to show you, and here's the track data. and I was just like, all right, I'm getting up and leaving. I can do this at home.
I remember that one.
Wait, well, where was it at?
That was at DEF CON.
Oh, okay.
I think that might have been the last DEF CON talk I really paid attention to.
And you got up. You got up and left.
Yeah, I got up and left. I was like, this is extremely like it was that they were like, we're going to use the terminal now. CD, is everyone following? And I was just like, holy shit.
Wow. Oh, geez. I just Googled something I was just talking about, and I found on isc2.org they're talking about risk management. And as an example of transferring risk, they say you may transfer the risk, for example, by forcing business partners to enter into a binding contract that places huge costs and liabilities on them for security breaches while leaving you squeaky clean. Don't laugh. PCI DSS does this. That's what it says on the page. That's
with,
the CISP page.
With Qualys as well, like they have is it Earthwave, I think the product is called. I'm pretty sure it's a Qualys product. And they want your SSH keys for your boxes to log in to do scans. Right. So now your SSH keys are in the hands of Qualys to log into your prod. Like, lol, what?
Tenable does that too. It's pretty standard actually for credentialed scans. There's lots of like COBIT and HIPAA and compliance and stuff that says, are you having full patch management scans done? And in order to do that, you have to log into every single device on the network. Whether it's Windows or Linux, you have to have administrative privileges to query like patch revisions and kernel versions and stuff.
Service accounts and shit. Yeah. No, it's interesting to see that this is just, 10 years later, somebody can get slapped or something like this for not managing it properly. Like, actually, Faith, it's like, as like somebody who does this, what sort of responsibility, I guess, are you liable for when you do a PCI scan or an audit like this?
Yeah, I mean, I have, again, the risk to me is transferred because I have like indemnity insurance, public liability insurance. Every corporation around here has to have that.
Yeah.
So we just transfer it away. So if somebody sues me, I don't know. I probably start suing the people that write the tools that I use that gave me a false sense of security?
Yeah, like where does it end? Like who is the one person who like screwed it up somewhere, right?
That swim guy, he does everything.
Swim, yeah. Forget SWIM, huh?
But that's like so like I've been on the other end where I've been the tech guy working with the QSA to get a platform certified. And basically after that tick box, like we're done, we're good. Like go talk to the QSA, he's the one that ticked the box.
Yeah.
I think this case will definitely decide it, whatever the outcome is.
It'll set a precedent. It's big enough to set legal precedent worldwide, I think.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So, so it's 10:30 now. Actually, Sam Houston just popped in. Hey, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Hey, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah. So tonight we're actually going to talk about actually this whole week we have a couple of different shows at the Sunday stream as well, and so we're going to talk at length about bug bounties and just what they are. Actually, I have a whole list of things we were going to talk about specifically, like our experiences, benefits and drawbacks, methodologies, how to actually go about doing bug bounties in a sane way, and how to like sort of measure the impact and actually communicate that. Because I feel like that's a big thing that people have struggled with is how do you actually explain what your bug means, whether it be a bounty or just any sort of disclosure in general. So that being said, a lot of us here have done research into this, and we are also graced this episode with Sam from BugCrowd, and next week we'll have Casey Ellis from BugCrowd to talk to us about this kind of stuff too.
Graced is a little generous, but no, I appreciate you guys like allowing me to join, and I'm happy to chat about bug bounties. To kind of give a little bit of background on me, I'm the senior community manager at BugCrowd. And by the way, if you can hear animals in the background, I'm sorry, but I'm at my house after work, so if there's noise. But yeah, I'm the senior community manager at BugCrowd. I joined almost 4 years ago. And before that, I did some community stuff at Synac, which is does bug bounty stuff as well. So yeah, I'm happy to chat about bug bounties.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess we can start off with just a general question of, I mean, how many people here have participated in bug bounties?
Yeah, I tried.
Yeah, a few times.
Has anybody actually gotten paid?
Eventually.
Not $100,000 for a Spectre bug, but yeah, I got some.
CVE 7 or whatever.
I got a couple of bottles of chili sauce.
I got I got $500 and a box of hardware worth a few grand. So
I got an email that said it was a dupe.
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah.
I got one the other day actually that said your bug at HackerOne has been closed as this
You're lagging
no
really
longer
bad.
exists.
Whoa.
I think I know what he's talking about.
That's
There was a kind of a platform change on HackerOne where, and obviously I don't work with them, so I can't represent them, but I think they made some sort of changes. It highlighted an interesting issue, which is, and it's something that we're thinking about as well at BugCrowd and we're working on, which is like you have all these companies or organizations that start bug bounties and then they kind of let them languish or not even kind of, they let them languish and they let them. So how do you deal with those old bugs? So I think that's what might have happened, Faith, on HackerOne, is they kind of like mass processed a bunch of old bugs.
Yeah. It was an API. I remember doing a brief test of it. It was connected to like some other third party, and there was nothing to look at. I can't even remember what bug I reported, but it was nothing. It was very, very simple. So happy to not get paid for that one. That's okay.
Yeah, but it highlighted, I mean, the issue that they were, like I said, that they were trying to solve is one that we need to solve as a industry, which is like, there's a lot of companies in this space or organizations that are operating in this space from a vendor's point of view, whether they're like offering a bug bounty or just a responsible disclosure or whatever. And there's companies that are super active in this space, and there's others that maybe started and forgot, or maybe they started and didn't realize how much of a time commitment it is, or who knows what. But they didn't really kind of fully follow through on it. So the unfortunate side of that is you have a bunch of researchers that are checking it out and they're not in the loop on how active or inactive or committed or uncommitted that organization is. So in terms of how committed they are to the bug bounty and like being on top of it. So it's something that there's a bunch of different approaches to it. One of the at BugCrowd that we took was we started only allowing companies that pretty much for the most part, allowing companies that are only willing to like spend money on it, essentially, not ones that are only willing to have free, like if they're not even willing to pay for the service, as in they're not even willing to pay BugCrowd, they're probably not really that interested in the bug bounty itself. So there's been some interesting challenges, well, a lot of interesting challenges in this space, and that's one of them, where you kind of weed out the organizations that are not going to be like totally committed to this agreement that they're entering in, whether they realize it or not. They're entering this sort of agreement or understanding, good faith agreement with researchers, and saying like, hey, if I set out these rules, and if you abide them, I agree to do X. And that's, I think, one of the ways or one of the areas where there's like disagreements or problems is because you're expecting these two groups to come together and enter this agreement, and oftentimes that the company on that side of agreement might not necessarily be doing the best to uphold their end of the bargain.
So now, I have a question for like how companies actually approach you, or you approach companies to actually do bug bounties. Because I mean, we see like sometimes very small companies, and then sometimes we see very big companies, and it's just like, how do you actually get them to get on board? Because I mean, there's some companies that I wish would do bug bounties and that had a better vulnerability disclosure policy in general. But how does that whole process kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, contrary to popular belief, at least from what I see on Twitter and stuff like that, I think a lot of people think that bug bounties are a fad or whatever, and that the companies are just kind of spinning them up without really thinking about it or something like that. Or maybe with a more fair argument is that a lot of people think that companies are just doing it as like a gesture of saying, hey, we actually care about security, but they don't really, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't obviously I'm biased here because I work in the industry, but I don't think that that's a fair representation of the actuality of bug bounties, because as a company, BugCrowd, and I'm sure our competitors, well, I know our competitors do the same, we're all going out there and we're beating down doors to try to, you know, get more business, as you would expect us to do. And through that process, there's a lot of education and, you know, classic sales that has to go into getting people on board with this whole thing, because a ton of organizations, most of them aren't keen to work with random hackers from the internet, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, because that's essentially what you're asking is like, hey, giant corporation X who probably barely even test their internal pen testers or whatever, like, how about you invite a bunch of randos from the internet to hack you and not do anything bad about it, or not do anything bad with that information?
One thing that's always puzzled me is, do you guys ask of your potential partners whether they've subjected, from a purely load testing point of view, have they subjected their assets to intense scanning before, and has it fallen over? Because like, if you've never had that before and you suddenly got 100 kids running Akinetics and Nessus scans across your entire Class C, stuff's going to fall over if you've never had any testing done before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had that. Casey could tell this story on Sunday when he's on, but that happened with one of the very first customers that he ever launched on BugCrowd. You know, back when it was just him, you know, random Australian dude, you know, launching it on.
I've got a pretty good idea. I know who was responsible for causing that problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know exactly.
Yeah, so it definitely happened and has happened over the years. Basically what happened is we try to come up with ways that we mitigate that sort of situation. And so one of the ways is, trying to, when you're onboarding them, or maybe even in the kind of prospecting phase, which means they haven't signed a contract or anything, they're still like, you know, trying to sort out if they want to work with us or whatever. We do ask them a lot of information, trying to kind of understand their pen testing situation. Like, when's the last time you were in a pen test, or what other security stuff are you doing? And we try to get an idea of what your security posture is, because that informs how we want to do this. So that
with the case,
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that basically informs various things that various ways that we go about this. One of which is, more often than not, at least at BugCrowd, we try to get you to launch a private bug bounty first and then go public. Because having a public bug bounty, or even just a public responsible disclosure program, obviously it's public, so you're opening yourselves up to a lot of different traffic or security testing from a lot of different people, which you might not be ready for, whether that's from like an infrastructure point of view, or even just like internal teams making sure that all this traffic that they're seeing is not necessarily bad guys, though some of it might be, you know, there's also good guys in there too. So there's a lot of like internal processes that company needs to work through. In addition to that, they also need to work through the internal processes of handling all these incoming bugs from a bug bounty. So we have to work through all that stuff, beyond just like web traffic or whatever, or API traffic or something. So there's that kind of stuff that we have to go through. We try our best. Obviously, it doesn't work all the time, but one of the tools in the arsenal, I would say, is having it be a private bug bounty and scaling it down. Some cases we might only invite 5 or 10 or 12 people. Other cases, maybe it's 20 or 30 or more that are invited in that first wave, and then we kind of add in researchers over time. But yeah, we try to tailor it to each one. I think people have a lot of issues if they try to approach this with like a one-size-fits-all situation, because that's just not the case. And I think that's where you run into a lot of problems if you kind of underestimate all the shit that has to go into launching these things so that they don't like turn into fire.
Yeah, I know that in the early programs, there was a lot of confusion over the use of automated scanners and what exactly is an automated scanner. And obviously, understanding you don't want people to just run hundreds of copies of Acudetics against a website. But
yeah,
yeah, that's a bit of a gray area for me, because most scopes that I've read of bug bounty scopes have had some language around the use of automated tools. But I get the feeling that's more, we don't want you to just cut and paste output from a tool. We want a little bit more customized than that.
it's a bit of both. Yeah, it's not a perfect way to. It's an imperfect way to try to limit noise, and also limit noise in terms of like overall just scanning traffic, fuzzing, or whatever the shit out of your website to knock, accidentally DDoS websites, because that's
So it's
that
kind of on both sides. Like, so eliminate network noise and eliminate back-end work for everybody else.
exactly. I don't have a great way of explaining, but I would say that for the most part, it's just trying to dissuade that. It's trying to dissuade people that don't really know much about their scanner. They're just clicking a couple buttons and letting it run. Because obviously there's a huge difference between like random script kiddie downloading a scanner and running it and going like balls to the wall on it, or someone that has a more measured approach to it and knows like how many requests to make per second or minute or whatever, and they can have a more sane approach to scanning. There's a big difference between those two things.
That's good to hear.
Detecting that a particular scan was coming from a noisy commercial scanner. Well, like if you're detecting user agents as coming from, Nexpos or Qualys or something like that, does that disqualify somebody from a bug bounty if it says no use of automated scanners?
I think maybe a more pointed question would be if it's an automated scan and it produces a good result without denial of service, is it usually fair game?
Yeah, I think in general, as long as there's like not a negative impact on the service or customer or whatever, it's usually fine.
That's awesome.
It's not like no one's gonna be like, "Yo, dude, you found this using Burp Suite. Like, get the hell out of here." Like,
I kind of thought that. I'll be honest. I actually used to think that.
I think so. I think I've heard of occasions where that's happened, actually. Not
Yeah.
Burp Suite in particular, but yeah.
Yeah, that's at least not our intent. And I'm glad to get on here and to talk to it. And that's frankly why I enjoy like going to DEF CON and stuff and trying to branch out beyond just like bug bounty hunters, which is, where I spend 95% of my time is just talking to bug bounty hunters. But yeah, there's researchers, there's very prolific, successful researchers that mostly run automated scans to look for various things that they've found to be, regularly occurring issues, and they run scans to find those things, and then they report them, and they make money off them. So it's not. I would say automation isn't banned outright. It's more like it's not a great way to basically just say like, please don't negatively impact the quality of service for other researchers or for users of this service. That's kind of like a verbose, like English speaking way to put it, but it's hard to put that in so many words for people that might live in India or Egypt or Pakistan or whatever. It's hard for me to describe that to you in English, let alone another language.
I don't even think if I was an Indian dude, I wouldn't even be paying attention to the scope. I'd just be firing on all cylinders and just shitting out as many bug reports as I can in the hopes that I get one to pay.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and I think that's one of the interesting discussions around the bug bounty community, because I think there's a lot of racism in security industry when it comes to people talking about Indian or Pakistani researchers or people from the Philippines or whatever, because they're used to getting like shit reports into their security app. And so basically a lot of people in the security industry, I think this kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier around this misconception of bug bounties basically being this like Band-Aid. A, it's a Band-Aid, and B, you just get like bullshit bug reports. and I think people get that idea because that's what comes into your security at, is someone emails you and says, "Hey, I found a security bug. Please PayPal me $500 or something, or I'm gonna disclose it."
Yeah.
And that's
It's an easy target to make fun of, and it's an easy thing to kind of
yeah.
How do you respond in those situations where a researcher, and it's happened many times, where they've gone ballistic on Twitter because a bug has been closed? I've even just searching Twitter now for BugCrowd, I'm seeing people complaining about the same thing.
Yeah.
Where they've emailed, where they're basically trying to extort BugCrowd, or they're threatening. They're like, "I will release this to Broken Crew, and then you guys will pay."
Broken Crew.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's going to change over time because, as we get into more difficult targets, I think that's going to be continue to be an interesting problem. Because right now, it's like, dude, no one gives a shit about your XSS. Like, ZDI is not going to buy your XSS for $10,000 or something.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not too much of an issue, or at least you can kind of like mitigate that a little bit on the website. I think it's going to be a little bit harder when we're going into car vulnerabilities or hardware or whatever, when this impact is higher, and therefore people are going to expect more money, or have at least some amount of leverage.
Like that Spectre variant vulnerability that got 100K from Intel, or the sort of bugs that could be sold to a Zerodium or a Azimuth or something or a Pontoon level kind of bug. It's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars on the black market.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think well, to answer your question, a lot of it utilizes the relationships that I've built and other people that I work with, like Casey, or just plain old talking to people and just trying to talk them through it and talk them down, and try to understand why they're frustrated. It's kind of like classic like conflict resolution type stuff,
Hostage negotiation.
Especially if you're dealing with actual teenage kids who don't have a lot of experience. They don't corporations or business or money. They don't understand these things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, or at least sometimes it happens because someone thinks that what they found is a big deal and it's actually not a big deal. And so you have to kind of explain that to them.
Sam, you mentioned earlier that some of the companies that you deal with, becoming partnering with BugCrowd, that they don't have good internal security practice, or maybe they don't do internal security audits. They're putting BugCrowd on top, and then now they're getting these reports in that might actually be critical. Is there a step that you guys take in between to try and sort of facilitate the communication between the researcher and the company that doesn't realize that CVSS 10 out of 10 is actually bad?
Yeah. So I would say, I firstly, I don't want to try to say that, any one BugCrowd customer is one thing or the other. They're, super secure, insecure, whatever. They come across all different spectrums. And we try to help them along the way to become more mature, obviously, and become more secure. So if there is a disagreement, and this can happen with any sort of company, it doesn't necessarily matter about your security maturity or situation. It might be just like the person that you're working with just doesn't, like the security analyst or whatever at said company just doesn't think that this is a big deal for whatever reason, and that totally happens. I just heard an example about that the other day, where this one person at this company just thought everything was shit, and then it got moved over to a different person in the company and everything was fine. So obviously people are people, and there's variety and things like that with that. But I would say in general, when there's a disagreement, we ask people to reach out to BugCrowd, and then ultimately what happens is then we go and talk to the customer. So that's been the benefit. There's been a lot of pluses and minuses to BugCrowd's approach to this marketplace, which is what we would call as more like a managed marketplace. And that means like we can't just sign up, like we can't just stand up a website and say, hey, we got supply and we got demand and we'll just match them up and everything will be cool. No, we realize like we have to manage the bounties, we have to like walk you through this launching process, and we'll just match them up and everything will be cool.
The program.
No, we realize
time,
like
make
we
sure
have
it's
to
going
manage
well.
the bounties, we
And
have to
so
like walk
due
you
to
through
that
this
and
launching
due to, like, that
process, and we try to facilitate bounties,
Kind of
communication, and also have the back of the researcher in these sorts of conversations. So we make an argument to the customer and say, hey, we think that this is actually a higher severity. And in some cases, if say we feel like there's not a great resolution to the problem, we actually have a pool of money that we set aside every year that we pay researchers out of our pockets, basically, to try to, we call it make it right, because we feel like it's our obligation to kind of keep this a healthy ecosystem to kind of make up for some of those what we feel might be the wrong decisions or whatever. But ultimately, it's the customers' money that they set aside, this bounty budget to pay people out of. So we try to kind of comment on top of it in some cases to try to make it right.
Can you talk to the point of where people in like countries like Syria and whatnot are doing bug bounties and not being able to get paid out?
Yeah, I saw that just the other day. Someone was tweeting to Casey and I about that. That is due to them being in a sanctioned country, U.S. sanctioned country. So we're just like limited in our ability to pay them. I, for better or worse, don't really know much about the legal stuff on this, so that's kind of the limit of my ability to speak to it. But that's kind of the situation. So I think in that case, they were getting paid from a Facebook bug bounty, and they had emailed Facebook, and Facebook was going to see what they could do. So I hope they come to a resolution there.
I know a little bit about financial sanctions, and in the States, it's OFAC, I believe.
Yeah.
And once OFAC say that you can't send money to this country, you're not sending money to that country. It's like that's the end of the. That's it's a higher government thing. No company can really, resolve that easily.
Yeah. A couple questions for you. The make it right thing is really cool. Do you know if other programs do something similar to that?
I don't know. It's something that we honestly, it's not like something that we market or whatever at BugCrowd. And it's something that kind of, I feel like, at least I'm not the person who created it, but I observe it through Slack channels and stuff. And it seems like it kind of came out of necessity, because BugCrowd's 120 people, and I've been there for a long time, so I'm not involved in everything. But yeah, it seems like it was kind of born out of necessity. It was like, hey, we feel like we need to make sure that these researchers understand that we feel they're valuable. And so it's like, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need it, but I'm glad that we do. And
that's great.
I hope that over time we won't need it as much. You know what I mean? But
exactly.
Like a lot of time goes into talking to these companies, and we have regular checkup calls with our customers, kind of just normal program health is what we call it, program health kind of meetings, and just saying, hey, your bug bounty is doing this, that, or the other thing, and this is what we think we need to do to get it in the direction that we want it to be in, if it's not, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah, definitely.
It's that consultative approach where it's like, hey, you should be paying more to be more competitive in this space, or hey, you need more scope because your bounty is like way too restrictive or whatever. And then we hope that they make the right decision.
Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's cool to see filling that obvious gap that exists. Do the customers see when you do one of the the make it right payments? Is it kind of like a bit of a feedback cycle of like, hey, we're going to fill the gap because you created the gap, maybe don't make the gap?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think it's in the platform, but I don't know if we have. That's a good question. But at least they would know. They would probably know at least that there was some sort of discussion around, payouts or something, or that we thought it should be higher or something.
Nice.
So yeah, that's a good question. But a lot of this, I mean, to be honest with you, we're all making this up as we go along. That's kind of the interesting ride of working at a startup, and especially being in a space that didn't exist really like 5 years ago. So these sorts of things like the make it right, they kind of just pop up, and then you kind of figure out how do you support it and keep it going, and figure out when you need to build it into the platform and all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of like the daily conversations that happen at BugCrowd, is that kind of thing. It's like, all right, how do we tackle this problem? And then like, is this something that Sam can do on his own, and then we can build it in the platform later, or what? And so, yeah, I feel like make it right. It's kind of one of those things where it kind of came out of necessity, and then we figure out how do we build it into the core thing if we need to, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's just this fundamental thing. It's like, holy shit, that's really cool. I mean, I come from the internal side where I'm trying to change an entire company's approach to things, maybe trying to establish an entire security function. And, a lot of the problems are the same, but since you guys are external, it's you have these different tools to use to solve certain problems. So that's just a really cool one that I hadn't even thought of before. So
yeah, it's given me, and I came into security from a consumer background. I worked in consumer technology. I worked in the video game industry. That's how I got my start. And so I came in not necessarily like relating to the giant banks of the world that we want to get to do bug bounties. I came in relating to hackers, because it works out that a lot of hackers are also gamers. At least they have a lot of the same interests, and we're all nerds anyway, so I could totally relate to that. I was a computer nerd, and took computer networking classes and stuff, so I felt like I jived really well. But yeah, over time, what I've really learned is exactly what you're kind of talking about, is like, I feel like the hackers and the people on the blue team, or the defensive side, they're all the same. They just took a different fork in the path at one point, and that I really love that. I mean, that's part of why I love going to DEF CON and even RSA, even though it's like it's or Black Hat even. Because you get to meet a lot of these cool people and get to see the security teams behind some of the biggest corporations in the world. They all care about this stuff as well, and they're oftentimes on the same page as you. They're trying to convince the people above them that this is something that's a good idea, or that doing security stuff, or even allowing people to responsibly disclose.
Exactly.
All that sort of stuff is a cultural shift. I mean, a lot of big companies, they're like, so you're saying that it's somehow good that I talk publicly about problems that we have in our products.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and that's a very counterintuitive thing to a lot of people. And that is part of this overall issue. A lot of companies don't want to admit. I mean, that's why there's a lot of reasons why we have a private bounties with people. But in some cases, it's just because they don't want to, they don't want it out there that they run a bug bounty for some reason.
Yep. Are there? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't really have anything else. Yeah.
So have you run into any companies or maybe patterns of behavior culturally that just tend to indicate, a cultural failing within security that you guys might not really be able to fix? And I'm not necessarily, I'm not asking how you go about handling that situation, just more so, what are the patterns you've seen that kind of indicate this?
Oh, that's well, I guess I would say it's easier for me to answer the reverse of that, which is like, I feel like the easiest people to get along with are people that are already a part of the community, and that are already like, it's like hand in glove. They're already hanging out. They're the people that go to Black Hat, but they're still there on Thursday and Friday and hanging out at DEF CON. They're just not wearing like a suit or whatever. They're wearing like flip flops and shorts or something on that Friday. So I found those people are the ones that totally get it, and they're the ones that you don't really need to convince. And hopefully they're like influential within their company, and they can argue it up, above them. But it can be like cultural differences. Like sometimes it's like you're working with the company based in North America, but the mothership company is based somewhere else that's maybe not as progressive culturally, or even just companies in general where InfoSec is not necessarily like a part of their culture, where the contrast of that would be, or different flip of that would be like Tesla, where their security team they're people that work with the bug bounty. A lot of them are bug bounty testers themselves or bug bounty researchers themselves.
Nice.
And the guy who runs it, used to run the security program at Apple, and so they're in the hacking community. And even Elon Musk, even I know he gets a lot of Twitter hate right now, but Elon Musk even is like interested in the bug bounty and security stuff. So it's like
Nice.
from the top down, they have that. Security is not necessarily like a weird thing. Where I think the companies that security in general just doesn't greatly fit into their culture. I imagine they have a lot of issues in general trying to get people on board with security, and bug bounty is going to definitely be one of them.
Yep, absolutely. That mirrors a lot what I've seen. Have you noticed that? I don't know if you have a way of measuring this or even ability to talk about it, but over the years, have you noticed the black market aspect of this grow and or decline in any ways? Probably in relation to commercial bug bounty programs.
I guess is your question, are the hackers and bug bounties tempted by the black market, or is it more of a general question of have seen the black market grow in general?
Yeah, has it grown or declined, kind of just with the way the markets have changed over the last few years?
That might be a better question for Casey on Sunday, because he's a lot more, higher level, both in terms of the company, but also like across the industry. He pays a lot more attention to like the macro stuff when I'm kind of like day to day, so heads down into the bug bounty industry.
Yeah, let me break up and down.
Yeah,
that's interesting because like I had a question too of like, do you see people in the black market trying to undercut the or overpay, like, oh, like we'll give you $500 for like SQL injection. Well, we'll give you $1,000 for it. Like, it's definitely more valuable to the person in the black market.
Yeah, I think I over the last handful of years, I don't really see anyone discussing that on the web side. I think that's or the mobile side even. I feel like that might become more of an issue as we get into harder and harder targets. I mean, you guys were talking about the Intel bug bounty today, which paid out $100,000 for a CVE 7, I think it was 7 something. I was checking that out earlier. So they're an example of kind of a new frontier, and I think, I mean, I could be wrong, and maybe HackerOne has figured out how to really tackle that sort of bug bounty researcher. But in my experience, at least, those people are hard to come by because it's like with car bug bounties. The guys who hacked the Jeeps, Chris and I forget what their names were. Sorry, I'm spacing right now. But Balasek and all those. Yeah. Like they didn't do bug bounties. Like they didn't, because they spent more money on buying that car and hacking it and stuff like that than they would have probably even made on a bug bounty. So there's this. The industry is kind of maturing on the same. The same sort of the token though, or whatever, Tesla has paid out quite a bit of money in bug bounties to researchers, in some cases, $30,000-$40,000 or whatever, to individual groups. So there is decent amounts of money, but I guess, long story short, I've not seen that conflict yet on the web or mobile side, but I'm wondering if that's going to be the case as we start going into more reverse engineering and other skill sets that are a lot more refined and a lot more niche, and that therefore the impact of the bug and the value of the bug is going to be higher, and also the war for that talent is going to be a lot more heated up. So we're going to have to come up with ways to incentivize those researchers to spend their time on this stuff. And also, we're going to have to incentivize them to spend it on reversing instead of doing web or mobile bounties or whatever, which they could be doing also. Because a lot of researchers have these different different skill sets. And if I'm asking you to like break open this IoT thing and try to reverse it over like a whole entire weekend, or you could hack on this website and make, potentially the same or a lot more money because you're going to maybe find a higher volume of bugs or something. Those are the interesting things that we're taking in, or we have to keep in mind, is that I'm not only in a war for your attention against other bug bounties, but I'm in a war for your attention against like your kids or watching TV or just chilling out or doing whatever. dorking around on a podcast on Tuesday night. You know, that's the kind of stuff that we're up against. And so I don't say that. I'm not saying that as like a Facebook executive because I want you to spend more time in my app. It's more that we need to like be humble when we think about how we structure these things and really make sure we do our best to make these things as easy as possible to get into and to make money and stuff.
Sam, I had a question that you just reminded me of, which is if Tesla is paying out quite a lot in bug bounties, but from what I've seen, I'm trying to think of who has actually paid out the most money inside BugCrowd or HackerOne's ecosystems. Thinking like Yahoo or Riot Games or one of these guys.
Yeah.
It seems that the gaming projects get a lot of attention and pay out quite well.
Yeah, I think, well, bug bounties aren't
the
too
reason
big.
I thought, sorry, that's the extra thing I was going to ask. A lot of the gaming guys, the people that find hacks on games that are primarily gamers first and they're hacker guys second, they're griefers. They want to find, wall hacks and aimbots and stuff. But a lot of the times, these guys that are finding bugs in games in order to get a competitive advantage in those games, they're actually finding like remote code execution and stuff. They don't care about that. They care about winning the game. They don't care about popping shells on the desktop of the box.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you judge the value of those? Because in a competitive esports kind of environment, a stressor or a Buddha or one of these shitty kind of kitty, from our perspective, we think that's terrible. But that's just how they're applying the bug. They're using it they could make quite a lot of money by having a competitive edge within one of these games. How do you judge the value of a bug given that kind of additional marketplace?
Yeah, it's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And sorry to interrupt you earlier. I was just going to say Riot's kind of an outlier. There's not that many video game companies in bug bounties. There's a few. Obviously, there's like Rockstar and Nintendo and Riot on HackerOne, and BugCrowd has a few as well. There's not too many. I would say the companies that pay out a lot of money are the ones that are like Riot. Like Riot in general is just doing well as a company. LOL, League of Legends just makes money hand over fist, and they have quite a large security team. And I think it's awesome that they've dedicated that much resources to a bug bounty and their larger security team. But in terms of how do you understand the value of a bug? For me, it's all around, or a big part of it is impact, right? So that's what really matters. I think it's part of why BugCrowd created a taxonomy called the vulnerability rating taxonomy. It's mostly focused around web and mobile vulnerabilities, but we created it as this kind of standard because of exactly that kind of question. Essentially, is like impact is different based on context and the application, the type of application. Are we talking about taking over the shopping cart of like an e-commerce app, or just the settings on a little tiny side app, or what? What are we talking about here? That to me is a big part of how you figure out the overall dollar value of a bug, is the actual impact of it.
Yeah, but it gets a little tricky. Like a cross-site scripting bug against an internet banking portal is obviously something that could be used by bad guys to make a lot of money quickly. But it gets a bit more esoteric when it's a cross-site scripting bug against, say, Riot Games that might allow you to, in a roundabout way, get access to some other gamer's profile and change things, move things around. I don't know, make money in that way in game.
Yeah.
So you might need to talk to an actual gamer to realize the impact of that particular bug in that game ecosystem. It's not as obvious as like monetary advantage in a financial app.
Well, the money scales, the payout scales are going to be relative to that company's industry, typically, or the type of app, right? So like financial companies are going to pay differently than car companies for bugs. So it's all relative to that like industry and what they're kind of up against. So there's a little bit of that too. There are market dynamics in play. And if that bug bounty wants to be, so to speak, competitive with other bug bounties in that space, they should have some sort of hopefully, compelling payout sort of schedule for that sort of bug in the context of their business.
You have some kind of black market metric that you could use as an example. You can say, here's an example of a similar bug in a similar company that is currently or has been sold in the past on black market forums for this amount of money.
I couldn't. Casey might be able to. I honestly haven't really messed around much with the dark webs. I hang out with all the the white hat hackers and stuff like that, the bug bounty hackers.
It's the same.
It appears like the black market buyers, they've come out into the light, but I think there are more than it seems.
Interesting. Yeah. So you feel like there's more demand,
like Zerodium or whatever, for instance.
Yeah, they're like openly 0-day brokers.
Yeah, they're not just on some darknet Tor forum anymore.
Yeah, they're an interesting company. They're one of their gave a presentation at B-Sides San Francisco. He gave like the keynote that I attended, and they're really interesting. I didn't really understand them before, to be honest with you, and now I have a little bit better of an understanding. I mean, essentially, they're buying bugs so that they can patch Trend Micro's customers before everyone else, and then they give that bug to Microsoft so they can patch all us plebs. So that's kind of zeroed. That was kind of my understanding, at least it seems like, of ZDI's kind of business model is buying bugs so that they can make sure that all their customers are taken care of before everyone else, and then they, responsibly disclose it. It's kind of a weird sort of situation.
Yeah, why not? Let's just go with that.
I mean, maybe there's other stuff too, and I don't know. But at least with bug bounties, the way we do it, we're working directly with Tesla. We're not just putting up a Tesla webpage and saying like, "Hey, we'll pay you a shitload of money for a big bug." It's no, we're working directly with any of the companies that are on BugCrowd.
No, that's really cool. So I mean, so you do more of the community side stuff, and like I'm kind of just curious on how do you sort of work with, I guess, maybe like newer people to this or younger people to this to get them involved in it, because I feel like some people don't really. I mean, they understand like that it's like I'll make money off of it, but I guess how do you build the sort of community to make somebody from strictly like, as we were saying before, like just firing up like Nessus or any other sort of automated tool or and like trying to go for pretty basic level things. How do you sort of work with those kind of communities to build people into being, I guess, a bit more acute and aware of like how to actually do stuff?
Yeah, it's we're still figuring it out. All of us in the space are, where we create, educational content. I've written blog posts. Like if you Google, I think it's like how to become a bug bounty hunter or how to get started as a bug bounty hunter. You'll find a blog post that I wrote that we link a lot of people to on BugCrowd, where it kind of walks through the basics. It talks about reading the Web Applications Hackers Handbook, reading the OWASP Top 10, checking out things like WebGoat and other free pieces of software, vulnerable web apps and whatever that you can practice on. And then I encourage people to try out bug bounties, or on BugCrowd, they are basically responsible disclosure programs, or we call them kudos programs. In some cases, those are going to be things which haven't gotten as much attention from other people, or even just programs like ISC Squared, which is a customer of ours, and you can get credits for your ISC Squared membership through hacking with them. So yeah.
So with so if you have say somebody you knew had a bug that was pretty critical, and there's a bug bounty available, and that bug bounty and the company that's is vulnerable is paying out in like thanks or t-shirts or something like that, but it's actually a serious bug. Is there something you guys can sort of say to them where you go like, do you re-engage with that company over time to, rather than just use your own money to patch the difference?
Yeah, and I wouldn't. I mean, I'm sure there's probably been some cases where we've paid money for bugs that haven't been paid or something, but we typically, I'd say, While that does happen sometimes, where a big bug comes into someone who's on a company that's only running responsible disclosure, I'd say oftentimes the conversation is more like, hey, you're running this thing, and yeah, you're getting some good stuff, but you could be getting some even better stuff if you actually paid. You know what I mean? So it's more, I guess it's kind of, it doesn't necessarily help that person that found that really badass bug. Or maybe it will actually. Sometimes programs do convert to paid and they kind of come back and get back those people that did well for them. Or in some cases like Fitbit, they run, for a while they were running a public responsible disclosure only. And if you found something cool, they would invite you to their private bug bounty that they pay on. So there are some different circumstances or situations, but I'd say as BugCrowd, I try to use it as an opportunity of say, hey, you just got this cool thing. So that shows you the value of working with external researchers, working with the crowd. You could be doing even better if you actually paid for paid researchers, and actually you could get that person to keep coming back and become a, you could say like become a patron or become a, an active member of your individual bounty program if you pay them and treat them well. Because that's something that we've seen. There's really great stories out there about, like Aruba Networks has been a long time customer of BugCrowd's, and one of the researchers that started doing really well on their program was this guy named Luke Young, who's a young researcher. He's in his early 20s who he borrowed an Aruba device from his college's network because they had some old devices, and he started messing around with it, and he made some decent money and built a relationship with the guy who runs the program over there, John, over at Aruba. And that's helped Luke in job interviews. He now works at LinkedIn. He got an internship at Uber and LinkedIn, and now he works full time at LinkedIn. So there are like great stories there of, and by the way, Luke still submits bugs to Aruba's program, years later. So there's a lot of benefits to companies investing in the individual researchers on their programs and building a relationship with them, and that company will continue to hopefully receive bugs, and those bugs will continue to be more complex and higher severity because those individual researchers are just spending more and more time with that app or product, whatever it is.
Nice. On that general theme, in terms of kind of setting it up for the researchers, have you noticed I don't know, what's the temperature within your customers for introducing safe harbor?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's been a hot topic lately in the bug bounty industry, especially on Twitter and stuff, and we've had a lot of discussions recently around it. So BugCrowd did Casey actually, he did a webinar recently around safe harbors, and we added safe harbor to our individual bug bounty.
Yes, good job.
Yeah, and we're going to work on rolling that out to other customers.
Nice.
That'd be actually a really good conversation with Casey to hear his thoughts on it around
cool.
safe harbor. But yeah, generally the goal is like we want to make it a standard so that like future companies will say, hey, this is a thing that we think you should do, and it's going to become standard on all our stuff. Is that cool or whatever? It'd be kind of more like an opt out rather than an opt in.
Yeah, perfect.
Like past companies, it's going to have to be more of an opt-in. So we're going to have to, explain to them the value of this and why it's important to them and to researchers.
Nice.
Because it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, we are asking people to trust each other, and that's what's the interesting conversation around safe harbors, because the question that was asked is like, how the hell has this worked without safe harbor? Like, why are like you don't see people getting sued? Like, you see people like Kevin getting threats from drone manufacturers or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. But luckily, those are mostly few and far between, or not as common.
Yeah, I know Kevin.
Yeah, so it's kind of a cultural shift, and it's one where we need to educate people and say this is important. There's a ton of benefits to working with the researcher community. It's like pretty much can't. I mean, you can try, but there's like you can't really argue with the results. So the future, like Casey's basically saying, as like kind of an ambassador of this whole thing, he's basically saying the future is working with researchers. You need to get on board now, and it's kind of up to you to making sure that that works well. And so he's, we're basically positioning ourselves to be that shepherd. But I think that's kind of the message from the industry is like, dude, you're going to have to figure out how to work with security researchers. So let's make sure that we're entering in this in a way that is going to be great for both sides. It's great for you as a company because your PR team can freaking chill out, your lawyers can chill out, and it's going to be cool. And then on the researcher side, hey, it's, you should have a good understanding of what you're getting into, whether it's like, you're not going to get weird cease and desist emails. And you also should have some sort of understanding of what you're going to get out of it. That's why we want to have, we have rewards tables on bounty briefs, which is not something that we had before. It used to just have like a reward range of 100 to 1,500 or, 100 to 10,000 or something like that. Where now we're like saying, hey, in this block of priority, we have a scale of P1 through P5. And we say, P1s are this range to this range. Because we want researchers to understand that when they're going into it, when they start hacking on a program. We don't like you to be surprised on the back end of the experience.
Yeah, definitely. And that all comes after the initial hurdle of accepting that direction. Have you seen a lot of maybe internal legal teams push back and say, no, man, there is no way I can accept safe harbor?
I would say even just in general, bug bounties, that happens like all the time. That happens all the time. That's why I like, it's interesting to see the Twitter chatter where people, again, I think they just say, hey, bug bounties are just this fad that everyone's doing as a way to like virtue signal that they give a shit about security. And that's, I don't know, it's not that easy. Based on how much I see our sales team working really hard to close every deal that they close. So it's oftentimes an uphill battle because it's not just convincing the security team that this is a good idea. It's convincing marketing that this is a good idea. It's convincing the legal teams that this is a good idea, and they're the ones that often like. Lol, what? You're saying that you want to invite random hackers to hack us and that that they're going to report it through some random company that you want to enter in an agreement with or whatever. These are all just weird things to people that are very risk averse.
Yeah, exactly. And even coming again internally at a company, when you start pushing that out, and something I recently went through is like, okay, let's get this bug bounty program. Okay, let's expand it public. Maybe we can throw in safe harbor, guys. What do you think? And it's obviously like very much pushing my luck. And I'm wondering, how much of that exists in so many of the other companies that are in the state right now.
That was a big question that I wanted to kind of save for the end. And actually, we are almost at the end. I didn't even realize. Wow, it's 11:20.
Perfect timing.
But so let's just putting everything we've set aside of the individual pieces of this. I guess what would you say is a good way for people who are, say, working at a company like what MG is describing, or smaller companies that might not really even understand the value of a bug bounty program? How do you ask them, how do you bring that up to the top brass about starting a bug bounty program or potentially trying to do that? Like, do you have resources for companies to kind of go through and say, here's the value of this that maybe somebody would be able to use to present to their company if they think that they need a bug bounty program?
Yeah, I mean, BugCrowd.com has a ton of white papers and one pagers and all kinds of stuff around, or even just web pages that list out resource results that we compare. So I guess it's more around what I would think about is what are you trying to accomplish with it? Because there's different ways to approach it. There's one of the kind of hot button ways on Twitter, or one of the hot button subjects around Twitter with this is replacing penetration tests, right? So there are people that are replacing or supplementing their penetration testing, and that's a market that is easier for us to enter simply because most companies are required to do pen tests for some sort of regulations or some sort of certifications or whatever. They have to do pen tests on some sort of regular schedule. So you could argue that, hey, we should do this in addition to those penetration tests because crowdsourced security or bug bounties, they get a ton of results. They typically get more results and higher severity issues than most penetration tests. And you could use those penetration testers to work on other things. And Casey can talk about this at length and much more in depth than I can. But essentially, what I want to get out on that conversation is bug bounties are great for a lot of things, but they can't do some other things, and that's where penetration testers are really great at too, right? Like on-site engagements or working in depth internally with your development teams to increase or just be better at security culture and just kind of working in depth where you don't need them every day like pen testing your stuff, where you could basically outsource a lot of that to crowdsourced security. Because I think a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction in the security community because they're afraid that, the bug bounty researchers are going to come and take our jobs, and like we're not here to take take your jobs. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not. That's not the goal. It's not like it's not a market like an Uber or like taxi cabs where there's like a finite amount of demand that is being satiated to a certain extent. There's like more work to go around in security. There's actually like a dearth of talent. We need like 500,000 people in the United States or something like that. There's in terms of open security positions, right? So there's more work than we have to go around that we can possibly fill. So maybe this is too optimistic or naive of me, but what I would like to see is more like bug bounties are going to have their niche, and penetration testing are going to have their own niche as well. And what I would do to the original question is I would think about what do I want the bug bounty to do within my security process or program overall. And I would think, so is it like we want someone to bang on these few products, and we think bug bounty researchers would be really great at that. And again, you could talk about resource or results, because bug bounty researchers do find high severity things quite often. So I would talk about that, or it could be there might be some other angles to it too, but I would try to tailor it to what you think is your boss going to be most interested in. Because that's what I've learned I'm 30 years old. I've been working in technology for the last 10 years. And I've learned that, each boss cares about things each boss is different, right? So you're going to have to kind of tailor it to what that company actually gives a shit about. And sometimes bosses really care about things that are kind of dumb, and you have to kind of tailor it to them. And sometimes they care about this other thing, and you have to kind of tailor it to that. So that's my kind of wishy-washy answer. Casey probably is going to have a much more well thought out and great answer than that. But from the guy who mostly works with hackers, that's kind of my take. But I don't necessarily have to sell customers that much. I'm more on the researcher side.
Yeah, well, that's awesome though. I mean, it's good perspective from both sides, or whoever we get on here. But yeah, I mean, thanks very much for coming and joining us, especially because we kind of were last second about some of this stuff. But I mean, definitely, we'd love to have you guys come back, anytime and discuss this kind of stuff, because we get a lot of questions, especially in this Discord, about bug bounties and people asking like, how I found this bug, how do I verify it, how do I report it, like, can you guys help me? Like, we work with people to say, hey, like, here's how you can communicate it. Here's how you can, like, not be, extorting people, or how to not also overblow some, like, local XSS or something, So yeah,
This is really good. Like some of the questions I've had to hold off on in case we get Casey coming on again, because Casey has like 5-10 years of pen testing experience before he started BugCrowd, so he's been on all sides of this equation personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's been really good. I've got a bunch of questions about what do you do with scope creep and out of scope and client side and red TV sort of stuff, but I'll leave that for Casey.
Yeah,
that's an ongoing question.
Yeah, he'll be great for that on Sunday, I believe, is when he'll be on. And yeah, I'm happy to. I guess you had a couple things that you wanted to cover that I noticed in the notes that I don't think we really covered, and so I'll try to cover them really quickly. Because one of the main ones that you talked about was how do I get people to. Basically, it was like, how do I get people to give a shit about the bug that I just reported?
Yeah.
Or how do I communicate impact? For me, what I think about is I try to put myself in that person or that company's shoes, and you're basically your job is to explain to that person why they should actually give a shit about this email that you just sent.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do that by saying this is a really big deal and you need to pay me a bunch of money, and if you don't, I'm going to publish it on my Medium blog post that has 2 readers. Like, that's not a compelling conversation, and it's immediately going to put them in the defense and just be like, what the hell is this rando doing? It's just not a great way to start a relationship.
Yeah.
Where for me, what I would do is I would say, hey, this is what I found, and really try to explain the impact and really think through how this could be weaponized or used, right? So earlier we were talking about there's a big difference between an XSS or a bug in shopping website than a bug in a game like Fortnite, where you could get a bunch of items for free and it would totally fuck up their economy. Those are big differences, and so you have to explain that as a researcher, as a hacker. Try to put yourself in the shoes of the recipient of this bug and explain to them why they should care. That's your job. You need to sell the bug, essentially, because if they don't fully understand it, that's honestly, it might feel like that's their failure because they're dumb or whatever, but it's kind of you need to try to sell it to them, because if you don't do a good job on that, then they're going to walk away and you're not going to get as much money or whatever that you thought you should have gotten. So I would try to go into it very calmly and respectfully explain what you think is the situation.
Would you say that sometimes, like screenshots with those giant red arrows and circles are probably a good thing to include?
Yeah, proof of concepts are a big one.
But I mean, like, without handing out like straight up poc.py.
Yeah.
If you do that, then you have no leverage at all, right? Like, should you be
that's a good
worried
point.
about that leverage?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Like, what I often do, because sometimes I'll have a researcher reach out to me and say, hey, I found this thing in this company, and maybe that company is running, I know that they have a private bug bounty, and I can't just invite that person to the private bug bounty or whatever. That's not how our system works, because we don't want people to find out that there's a private bounty and then just emailing us to like beg to get invited to it. We don't want to get hacked, like social engineered that way. So typically what I do is I ask that researcher to email me and explain to me in a high level what they found and like the impact of it. Not say exactly what they found, but just be like, hey, I found this thing on this page, and I think this is a big deal because of X. And that at least I think helps get the point across, and then you can open up that dialogue of like, okay, cool, can you send me a proof of concept or something? But yeah, I mean, make your best judgment, and in terms of what you think is a great way to make a compelling case without tipping your hand one way or the other, not tipping your hand too much so that they can figure out what the bug was so that they can go patch it, before you give them too much information or whatever. I would try your best. And in terms of people getting started in bug bounties, just keep going, keep trying to learn as much as you can. Don't give up. Try to network with other researchers. Follow people on Twitter. Tons of folks. Tons of folks. Tons of fucks are on Twitter as well. But tons of folks are on Twitter, and you can find them on Twitter and follow people there and read their blogs and read stuff on NetSec on Reddit. Watch presentations on YouTube. BugCrowd has run conferences called Level Up twice now, where we put all the information up for free on YouTube. So those are great ways to get started. And I guess the path to success isn't long. I've seen researchers go from 0 to making meaningful amounts of money in the span of a year or a year and a half or 2 years. And while
sitting at day 0, it might seem like a year is a long way away. But for me, it's really cool to see researchers go from I'm a total noob to like, hey, I just had my first $3,000 bug. You know, I don't know about you, but like $3,000 to me, if that just showed up on my PayPal account right now, that would be pretty fucking cool. And so to go from like 0 to getting $3,000 in your PayPal account for one bug, that's pretty awesome. And to see people do that in the span of a year and a half is awesome. And that's possible with you know, a lot of focus and hard work, and don't keep pushing yourself to find those higher severity bugs. Don't just settle with, you know, you found what you think is an easy path to victory, which is just finding those low severity bugs and just, you know, spray and pray, basically trying to find as many as possible. It's actually going to be probably a more efficient use of your time if you try to find something that's a little bit higher severity, and you don't need to find as many of them, and they're going to pay a little bit more. They're going to pay in some cases a lot more. You know, maybe 4x. You went from finding a bunch of $100 bugs to finding $500 bugs. You know, that's
that's
big
actually
difference.
a good point. That's a good point as well. Like those low-hanging fruit bugs. Maybe it's a shitty XSS, but like I always see those as like the potential foothold to the RCE. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
it's indicative of like if you're making fundamental input validation mistakes on like a search form on the front page of your website, there's probably more serious bugs to find.
Right? Exactly. It's like one cockroach.
exactly. Yeah.
You could find more bugs through one you already have as well.
Exactly. Training is a big thing too.
There certainly are people that make like a full-time living out of bug bounties by sheer volume. Like they do find $20,000 bugs now and then, but it's the $100, $500 bugs they find. You know,
exactly.
month.
Yeah, there are quite prolific researchers that make their money off of, you know, those P3, P4 bugs that are going to be paying in the mid hundreds, you know, but they just find a ton of them and they make a lot of money. They're not, you know, the people that they're not finding the $2,000 and $5,000 and $10,000 bugs necessarily, but they still can make a decent amount of money. But yeah, there's a lot of money to be made, and what's cool is the industry is growing as more and more companies become on board. So right now we're just kind of figuring out that supply and demand, and we're trying to grow the supply of companies, essentially, or demand is a better way to put it. We're trying to grow the demand of companies so that we can meet the supply of researchers and help researchers make a meaningful income out there, which is happening more and more.
The cool things about bug bounties is you could learn one particular specialty, like you just learn one bug class or even one actual vulnerability, and just apply it across all of the different bug bounties that are available. And,
that's totally a thing that happens. Yeah.
I mean, so that could be a different skill set. Like you could be good at scaling something rather than like you're better at getting coverage laterally rather than going deep on one particular.
Exactly. That's what there's some researchers that do that. I mean, some of you guys may know Struzeri. He's a really good mobile researcher, and what he does sometimes is he just sets up scanners for certain types of mobile vulnerabilities. And one of the cool things that he does is when he finds those, he uses that money and donates it to charity, because in his mind it's like semi-free money because he wasn't proactively looking for the bug manually. He set up a scanner to do it.
Just automatically pulling down latest APKs from some store and just quickly scanning them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of guys that do that.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Sam, for coming on and talking. We'd love to have you come back anytime, chat about stuff. Even if you're just hanging out in Discord and want to pop into chat, we're always here.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people contact you if they want to?
Sure. So you can find BugCrowd at bugcrowd.com. That's BugCrowd.com. And we're that on Twitter as well, at BugCrowd. You can, if you want to reach out to me, ask me questions or whatever, you can find me on Twitter at Sam Houston. That's SamHouston. And my direct messages are open on Twitter as well. So you can DM me there, or you can email me at sam@bugcrowd.com.
And follow it on Twitter.
Yeah. You follow me and hang out. And I really appreciate everyone's time. This has been my world for the last so I'm kind of obsessed with bug bounties. So it's cool to hang out with people and they don't get annoyed with me for talking about bug bounties for an hour.
No, we could talk about this for a very long time, I feel. So I'm glad that we have like two episodes to kind of deep dive into it. So awesome. So yeah, we'll see everybody on Sunday. We are going to be talking to Casey Ellis and hopefully Nafi and some other researchers about their methodologies and how they do their thing and why they do it. So yeah, we'll see everybody on Sunday. So catch you later. Also, retweet our tweet to the dark web movie that we just posted, please.
Oh yeah.
Good night.
Oh yeah.